How's it going, everybody? How are you doing, my friends? And we're back in Stormworks, and I want to take you through a few things that I've been doing in Stormworks. I've actually been spending quite a bit of time in Stormworks lately, um, because I just like the troubleshooting aspects of it, which kind of fits with my hobby as well, not my hobby, my career as a mechanic. Um, I mean, I got into the career because of the troubleshooting. I don't want to do mundane stuff. I want to get a car that's broken and figure out how to fix it. That's what the whole thing is. And Stormworks kind of scratches that little that little um, fun spot, where it's kind of like try to solve the problems. Now the thing with Stormworks is it doesn't work the same as real world. So what happens in real world does not happen in Stormworks, and vice versa. Even though Stormworks is very, very technical, does a lot of processing, there's a lot of engineering in it. It's got like fluid dynamics, it's got electricity, it's got gases, and you can process like oil into into gas and jet fuel and all that. It's got all this built into it, and they've done a fairly decent job, but it's definitely not a simulation of the real world. So figuring out what works in Stormworks is not the same as figuring out what works in the real life, but it is still fun. It is still loads and loads of fun. So, some of you, if you've seen my earlier videos, you might recognize this guy. Man, oh man! And give me 1 second here. I think I have my volume. Hold on. Fix that. Oh, and it's not coming through my headset. That would be why I can't hear a damn thing. Hold on. Here we go. Hey, I can hear the game now. Okay, so some of you might remember this guy. This is the large engine that we made, and it fires up, and it has a gets itself running. You can hear it just kicking like a mule. Now, I was online on the Stormworks page, shall we say, or the Stormworks Discord, and you'll see I ran into this guy named Mondo, who's been doing some pretty awesome things here. You can see these clutches here. You can see these clutches are set to a specific number, a very specific number. And he found out that if you had that very specific number, you can fully engage your engine clutch, which I'm going to do now. I've got my engine clutch fully engaged. Fully engaged. You can see I'm maintaining speed, but look at the output. It was up at 20,000. On 4 medium generators. I was getting 20,000. 20,000. Stormworks, they call them SKUs, Stormworks, or SKWs, Stormworks kilowatts. But look at how fast that filled this battery. I'm going to reset this just to so you can see that again. I'm going to spawn it in. We're going to spawn in. And this thing spawns in. You get and all the motors start running. Yeah, all the motors start running. You can see we're currently at 50, and you remember the engine kicks on. Engine kicks on when we hit 50% power, which we just did. Okay. I'm actually going to crank the sucker right up to full right now. Oh, I can't. I gotta wait until it starts. My bad. My bad. My bad. Forgot this thing's a little heavy to start. There it goes. Okay, now that it's running, I'm going to crank this up. You're going to see, watch the power generation. This is the raw output power that we're getting. We're getting 20,000 out of this. Look at that battery fill. That's percentage. And the motor's now shut down. That motor ran for what? 10 seconds? Maybe? And we went from half a charge on this battery to a full charge on this battery with the propellers still running. That is absolutely ridiculous. So, once we messed around with this, because I was screwing around with this and I was working with the generators, and I had, if you remember correctly, I had 2 medium generators on this, and I was getting somewhere around 2,000 to 3,000, I think it was. Or 2 large generators, sorry. I was powering this into 2 large generators, and I was getting around 2,000 to 3,000. I thought that was a good number. I really thought that was a good number. But then I saw this setup, which is basically his stuff is from here back, this back, and really all it is 4 clutches, set at that very very specific number, and that's it. There's nothing else to it. That's it. That very very specific clutch value, 0.604135. That's programmed into all 4 clutches. All 4 clutches. Of course, I have a 3-to-1 switch, or 1-to-3 switch, whatever you want to call it. Gear ratio here. But I already had that. I already had that when I had the 2 generators. So from here back, that's all that I got from him was that number. That's pretty much all I got from him was that number, and he said to use 4 medium generators instead of the 2 large ones. And holy shit. And I can even I showed him my nuclear reactor, because my nuclear reactor was using 4 large generators, and it was outputting somewhere, I think around 1,200, I think it was outputting, which is, I thought was respectable, 1,200 was the highest I could get my nuclear reactor. So here's my nuclear reactor, and you might notice on the back here, that same thing. That same design. The 4 clutches set to that very, very, very special number, 0.604135. Now this number he came up with. I can't take credit for this. Mondo came up with this number. And this is just a 4 number averager that he was using to add them all together. But so that's nothing major. But this number here, he came up with, and then I, of course, had to painstakingly retune my reactor, because my reactor, I didn't realize it wasn't running at the pressure it needed to run at. I didn't realize that turbines had to run at 60. You had to have 60 steam for them to be optimally running. And I was somewhere around, I think I had 30 in a couple of these, and I had like less than that in a couple of these. So I wasn't running, my steam turbines weren't running optimal. So I had to do some repiping and all that, figure it out. So I threw his thing on the back here, and then I, messed with this for a couple hours at least. And finally, I got all of the piping done. I got the proper amount of water in here, because I needed to find the proper water levels to get the steam in and steam out to 60. I also had to mess around with the temperature readings, because I found there was a sweet spot. Mondo really got me into tuning. He got me into tuning these things, and so I had some levers here, and the levers were controlling like this constant number here, 150. I had a lever here, and I was upping it, down, up, down, to find out where the optimal heat was to get the best output. I love the sound of that. Listen to the hum. Oh, she's about to get really friggin' loud, by the way, just so you know. So yeah, what happens is the reactor rods will heat up to 150. Hear that? That's the cooling rods going in. So you see it's going to come down to 163, 160. It's going to go down, and then it'll start going back up again. You hear it go back in? It'll start climbing again. So what that does, what that cycle is going to do, that's that on-off cycle, is it's going to actually keep the boiler at 113, right around 113 and a little bit. And that was the sweet spot. You can hear the turbines kicking in. I'm not going to show you the generator output. I ain't going to show it to you. Not yet. Not until she's at full tilt. So once this hits about 113, you can still see the needle going up on the other side there. Yeah, you right above the button. That's the generator output. So we're gonna get up to 113, like I said. That's when we know she's at full tilt. And you can hear it still spinning up. It's still going up. Right around 113, 60, 30 to 60. It's gonna bounce somewhere between 30 to 60 here, I think. And go down to about 30, and then you go up to about 60, and then come down to about 30. But it'll stay at 113. Or they're gonna go to 114. Went to 114, so we get a higher enemy. But it's going to come back down into 113 again. So that's my golden number right there, is 113. And it will stabilize. Like you can see we're still bouncing around a little bit here. Steam pressure still bouncing around. All of this will stabilize. But, ready for the magic number? Look at that. Look at that. 13,000 off of nuclear. 13,000 off of nuclear. I realize I just had 20 off the diesel, but this is nuclear. I don't have to fuel this. 13,000, and I don't have to fuel it. Well, I mean, you got to replace the rods after 5 years or something like that of in-game time. But if I put this in a build, I am never going to need to use the glitch generator ever again. If I put this in my larger boats or larger things, I won't have to use the glitch generator anymore. And I can pull that out and I can say, you know what, the glitch was great. It got me around the hump of the shittiness that is the power supplies in this game. And you can see I'm running 60, 60, every steam turbine, I got max 60, 60, 60 right across the whole board. So that is now running as heavy as it can run. And these generators, look at how stable that is. The number's not even fluctuating. That's how stable it is. The number is solid, it is stable, it's not going anywhere. And I left this thing running for over an hour, real time, not game time, real time. Well, I guess it would also be game time because an hour in game is an hour in real life. But I let this thing run for an hour. That number did not change. The boiler temperature stayed right in that range, 113, just touching 114, but stayed right in that range. The rod temperature gets into a nice little flow pattern, a nice little sine wave pattern. Battery stays full, output stays 13,256, and our steam pressure, it fluctuates here and there, but I mean that is the thing of beauty. Like I said, I left this running for over an hour, real time, and all of those numbers stayed stable. I came back to it an hour later, all the numbers were the same. They didn't go up, didn't go down, they just stayed beautifully stable, and that is freaking crazy. So let's look at the shutdown of this thing. Does that not sound like a reactor shutdown or what? I absolutely freaking love it. I love it. So that is my new reactor. It's on the workshop. It's on the workshop now as 13. I think it's 13,000 plus or something like that. It's labeled. So this is on the workshop, ready to go. If anybody wants to add it to their build or whatever. But continuing right along, after this, I started getting into, actually what led me down this road wasn't even power. I ended up talking to this guy, and we ended up showing each other our builds, and that's where we got into this whole rigmarole, because he's quite the LUA worker. He does a lot of LUA, which is microcontroller programming, basically. And get rid of that. I don't want you to see that yet. So, okay. So I was working on this at the time I ran into him. I was working on this, and I had a problem, and it was so stupid. I had actually just forgot to connect one of these up, and that was the whole problem. I forgot to connect one of these up. But I had been playing with it for hours, and I was like, "Oh my god, I need help!" So I went to the Stormworks Discord, and I was like, "Somebody help me! I need help with this. I can't get it to work." But what this is just it's a radio signal detector, and what it does. This was my first time playing around with LUA scripts. So I didn't really know what I was doing. I've done programming before, but I've never programmed in Lua, which is honestly, it's kind of an easy language. Um, so anyway, what this does is it I have the ability to lock to a current frequency. This is like a radio console, like you would sit at this radio console. You have a button to lock to a frequency, and you have a keyboard, and that keyboard has two entries: a low frequency and a high frequency. You have a radio tower, and that's it. That's all you have. That's all you need. You of course have speakers and all that because you got a radio tower, so you got a speaker so you can hear what's going on, of course. But that's all on the other end. That has nothing to do with this. Um, so when I was writing this, I was trying to figure out how to scan frequencies, scan a group of frequencies, and then when it finds a signal, pause on that signal so you can hear what's going on. You know, if you have a radio scanner and you set it to scan, and then it comes across a channel that somebody's talking on, it'll pause there. And then when it pauses, I have the option to lock it in. So if you're sitting at the console and you're like somebody starts to talk and you're like, "Ooh, that's interesting," you press the button, lock it in that frequency, and then you can start listening to their conversation. Or, you know, if it doesn't interest you, you just don't lock it in, and it'll when they stop talking, it'll skip to the next frequency and continue the scan through whatever frequencies you set. So I set this up through a LUA script, and basically what I got is don't mind these stages. These stages are when I was troubleshooting, I wanted to see whether it was getting stuck at certain places. So you can see I set, you know, stage 1 is here, stage 2 is here, stage 3 is here. So if it got past, if it started the program, it would trigger stage 1. If it got past count 5, it would trigger stage 2. You know, if it actually detected a frequency, or if you program in a frequency, I should say, if you program in the maximum frequency in the keyboard, it would trigger stage 3. Then, you know, it would go through, and so on and so forth. So then when it goes to the next frequency, that would trigger stage 4, and then you get to stage 5, which is I'm at the end and I'm going to set my numbers and then kick it out. And then of course I created a screen function, so this outputs the information to the screen, so you can see stage 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and the frequency it's currently scanning on. And then of course I would have to output the frequency, and I would have to output the lock-on signal. So if it did find a signal, if it did get a signal, it would turn lock-on to true. If it found a signal, it would turn lock-on to true, and that would get sent out so I can have that appear at a light, because that's a boolean. That's not a number. It's a boolean. It's true or false. It's on or off. So I would output the frequency, the number as the frequency, and then I would output on or off if we found a signal, and it would go through. And then there was also a pause trigger in here. So like I said, if it found a signal, it would pause, and it would trigger the lock on. So it would show me that it was locked on, and it would pause the the skipping to the next frequency. So you can see if pause or hold, then frequency equals frequency. We don't go to the next frequency. So otherwise, if pause or hold is not on, like if it's not paused, and if I don't have the hold button on, then it'll go into stage 4, and it'll up the frequency to the next frequency, or reset the frequency cycle if it reaches the maximum frequency that the player entered. So this was a nice little setup, and it worked. It worked great. In fact, it worked so great, I decided to go one step further, because this can scan using one tower. It can scan a radio frequency, find out if that frequency is active, tune it in, check the signal strength, and it can pause, and it can pause and unpause, so it can do things when it finds a signal. And I thought, well, that's kind of interesting. What could I do with this besides just listening in to frequencies? What could I do with this? So then I don't actually have, I don't believe I have the working display of this. I think I accidentally saved over it. Um, oh, get out of there. Get out of there. I don't think I might have saved over it. It was this C base here, which I can't, of course, load in this editor because it's too freaking big. But maybe I can, if I use the selection grid here, go to here, maybe I can load in just a chunk of it. Wow, okay. I actually need this chunk over here. That is lagorific. I actually need that chunk over there. So, if I get the floor to appear here. Oh, but my tower's going to be up in the air. Or my tower's going to be off the screen. That's fine. But anyway, I had the console set up over in the corner over here. You can kind of see it there. And then it used this radio tower up here. So I'm not going to be able to paste this in because I'll end up losing that. I'll lose the tower and I'll have to hook it all back up again. And yeah, it's going to be too much of a hassle. So I'm not going to worry about that. So we're just going to skip ahead. So once I got that working, and once I was able to scan frequencies and tune into frequencies and lock on to frequencies and listen into frequencies, I was like, and then I hit the point of, you know, what else can I do with this? And then I remembered from some old I think it was World War II documentaries, that they had used radio signals as a method of determining the direction of a target. So I thought, well, how come I might be able to take this one step further in Stormworks. I might be able to actually not only detect the direction of a target, but the distance of a target, and then plot that. So, oh god, go away. So then I came up with this design, and this has gone through a lot of iterations. This has been vamped and revamped again and revamped 50 times and redone and rearranged and just whatever. It's been there, it's done that. Because I had to tune it to actually get it to work. And I have it working to a point. So let me show you. I haven't. This isn't finished yet. This is just I'm at kind of a interim stage, and I haven't quite crested the top yet. So let me show you this. It's a radio antenna grid, as you can see, and this is actually this everything on this little platform here is actually it. Those things out there, those are tests. I got one antenna over there. I got one antenna there. I have one here, and I have one there. And the reason these antennas exist is so I could double check my numbers. So you can see this is on frequency 50, and then I have one over here that's on frequency 100. I have one over here that's on, this one should be 25 or 75, 25, and this one should be 75. Yeah, 75. And then I have this cart here, which is running 150 and 125. And the reason I'm doing that is because I have two different antennas on here. I have a huge antenna on the top, and I have a large antenna on the bottom, and you'll see why. You'll see why shortly. So this is actually the controller back here. It is huge, and it does a lot. It does way more than I ever thought I'd be able to get it to do. And I have my tower, and my tower specifically, as you can see, my tower has cardinal directions on it. East, north, west, and then the south on the back. And each tower is on its cardinal point. You'll see the north tower has a large antenna. All of these ones on the top are huge. And there's one large antenna here on the north tower. I'll explain that later too. I also have a GPS in the middle of the tower, so I know where the dead center of the tower is. So I know I have four radio towers A fifth, this is what I'm going to call my signal check tower, or my check tower, that's this one, and then my GPS, which is the center of my tower. And like I said, the tower rotates automatically to face north. I have a compass right here, and this compass uses a controller here to turn the pivot underneath to make sure that this tower faces north at all times. If I could rotate this, if I could rotate this platform, you would see that that tower would just continue to follow north. So, what am I doing with this? Well, these are GPS coordinates. This is the in-game GPS. You'll see that each of these test towers has an antenna. Right under the antenna, there's a GPS, and that is the raw GPS data right there from that one. And each of them has that. Each of them has a GPS, and each of them has a radio tower. Different radio towers, because again, that's for testing purposes. You can see I have this one's a medium. I believe this one over here is a huge. Yep, this one's a huge, and then I have a small one, and then the medium one back here. Oh, this is the large one. The medium one's over there. But these were placed in no particular order. I just needed to know if I could detect what type of tower the target was using. So each of my targets I put a different radio tower on, and that's why I also did this. That's why I have a huge one here and I have a large one here, because I also wanted to make sure that at a distance, if I got this working, you know, in this little bay, I wanted to make sure that at a distance it was still accurate. You know, happily it is. So I'll start off by taking this guy out, and I'm going to show you it working before I actually get into the scruples of what's actually going on. So I want to find a point that is going to be very easily referenced on the map, because that way I can prove that it's doing what it's doing. So I'm going to come down here to the hook in the corner here, right where this dock is, because the dock is, if you look at the map, the dock is right here, this hook, it goes to a straight line. That's undeniable where this spot is. It is absolutely undeniable if I put a vehicle right there, that if we're looking at the map, I do not have, get out of here. Disaster should not be turned on this. Ugh, now we get to deal with the siren. Stupid thing. You know what? Okay. I'm gonna drive down to the end of the dock and turn the damn siren off. I don't think that's the only siren on this island, though, which is the problem. Is this the only siren on the island? It is! Nice. Shut up. Yeah, disasters are supposed to be turned off. When I created this game, I turned off the disasters. So I don't know why tsunami's happening, but whatever. Alright, so let's do what we were doing with this, and that's parking it right at this corner. So I have a good reference point when I'm looking at the map as to where this vehicle is actually located. And I'm going to put the antenna in that spot, because that's what we're going to be basing this off. We're going to be basing this off of the antenna's location, not necessarily the vehicle's location. So we'll put the antenna pretty much right in the crook here. Put the brakes on, and away we go. We'll leave that parked there. And I'm just going to scoot myself back up here. Okay. So here's our radio tower. And you can see our GPS scanner, which is, there's also a GPS on the on that cart, and that GPS signal is coming through here. It's coming through the composite, getting calculated out for the GPS distance, and that's coming up, bam, right here on 125 and 150. So our antenna is in position. Our antenna is aligned. which I had it output and a light when it is aligned, just so I know that I'm getting proper readings. Our map is on, but it's zoomed out, or it's zoomed in, so I can zoom it out. So basically, this is just displaying the map. It's not doing anything yet. Now, I know that my frequencies are 25, 50, 75, 100, 125, and 150. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to program in that frequency, just to show you. So I'm going to start with frequency 25. And you'll see that when I have frequency 25, it is calculated that it is a huge antenna. It has the range from, well, it has the range from all the antennas, but right now it's just displaying the north and south. The frequency 25 and the average range, which is the average of all 4 towers, the range that is calculated is 34.19. Now, the GPS range, I've actually found, is less accurate than the calculated range from the radio. I've actually found out that the calculated range is more accurate than the GPS range, which is interesting. I find that very, very interesting. So when I'm looking at this, the average range between the 4 towers, 34.19, and here it's showing 33.99 for the GPS. So pretty damn close, pretty close. But I would actually trust this number more. Okay, so now we're going to check tower 50. Check 50. We'll check 50. 50 is, you can see it's a large antenna, which we already determined it was a large antenna. Which one was 50? This one? Yeah, that's 50. Okay. So 50 is that one. So you can see its distance is calculated here. The north towers is definitely closer than the south tower. And the average range is 16.17. Now, the average should be the center of the tower, which is where I have the GPS. So 1617 over here, it's showing 1574. So it's within a meter. This is meters. So that's within a meter from there to there. That's how accurate this is. Between the GPS and the radar distance, or the not radar, radio frequency distance. So now I'm going to go to 75. You see that change. 75 is our medium antenna, which I believe is that guy out there. You're going to see our south is actually, well, that's interesting. Is that our... That is our medium. That's 75. Why is our north... Oh wait, no, that's right. Our north is farther away than the south. Duh. Okay. I was like, why is the north number bigger? And then I'm like, oh, I'm not looking at the signal strength. I'm looking at the distance. So yeah, the north antenna is farther away than the south antenna. Right. So its average range is 17.87. Again, it's 17.5. So we're within a meter, which is pretty damn accurate. And then if we change our thing here, let's go to 100, which will be the big one over there, or the small one over there. So you can see it knows it's a small antenna, and what it's doing is it's taking the signal from the large antenna, and it's taking the signal from the antenna directly below it. So it's taking the signal from the huge antenna, and it's taking the signal from this large antenna. And what it's doing is it's calculating. It knows how far this is supposed to travel. It knows how far this is supposed to travel. So what it's doing is it's taking the combination of those, running it through an equation, and processing out exactly how far that tower can reach. So this one's a small tower, which means it can only reach about 100 meters. So it's calculating out, these two towers are calculating out that tower over there only has a range of about 100 meters. And so it automatically knows that's a small tower, because I've told it. I've told it that if you detect a tower that only has a range between this and this, then it's got to be a small tower. There's no other option, because these towers have such a large gap between them as far as range. I mean, the huge one is 20 kilometers, and then the large one's 4 kilometers. That's a massive difference. So you're never going to mistake a huge tower for a large tower when you're performing this calculation. Same with a large to a medium. A large is 4,000, a medium is 1,000. So you have a buffer of 3,000 there that you can play with. So and the larger you make your buffer, the more accurate you're going to be at which actual tower you're looking at. And then of course the small is 100. The small only goes out to 100. So even there, I believe I went from a range of 50. If it comes up and if the tower comes up, if the numbers come up and say, you know, it's 50 to 150, it automatically knows it's a small tower and sets a number of 100. And that's what it uses to calculate. It doesn't use the number that it actually processes to calculate, because that creates a mess in your calculations. So what it actually does is it takes those numbers, figures out what tower it's using, and then uses the appropriate number. So if it's a huge tower, it'll use 20,000. If it's a large tower, it'll use 4,000. If it's a medium tower, it'll use 1,000. And if it's a small tower, it'll use 100, regardless of what the actual number is that's coming from here, because that number can vary with, you know, battery life and all that stuff. But this is a very, very easy way to calculate out what kind of tower you're dealing with. And then from that, you can calculate out, you have to assume that their battery's full. Because if you don't assume their battery's full, or if you don't know what their battery is, it's impossible to make the calculation. But as you can see here, calculating a full battery, which is what I have a full battery. It's pretty damn accurate. And I don't know many players in Stormworks that don't run with full batteries. They'll have a way to charge up their battery if it gets below 50 or normally 80, 70 to 80, because somewhere around 90 to 80, you start losing power in things, like motors will slow down and all this. So I don't know a single person who actually plays Stormworks and doesn't want to keep their batteries at full as much as they can, as often as they can. They want to keep those batteries topped up, because you lose performance really quick when they start to go down. But anyways, so there you go. There's my frequency demonstration. Now, for the other part of the demonstration, you can see here that we have a distance here of 416.17. Now, I found out that the further you go away, the less accurate these actually get. So I'll show you right now. I'll go to frequency 125, or I could go to 150. It doesn't matter. They're both going to come up the same thing. So I'll go to 125. You'll see it knows it's a large antenna, and it knows the distance is 416.42. And that number might bounce because that vehicle is not stable. You might have noticed when I got off the vehicle that it was vibrating a little bit. It was like doing a little vibration, because Stormworks vehicles like to do that. They don't like to stay put. They like to vibrate a little bit. And this takes that into account. You'll see these numbers every once in a while shift just so tiny. And that's because the damn vehicle's moving. It's actually moving. But it is such a small movement. Like, it's not moving a meter. It's just moving a tiny, tiny, tiny bit. But you can see that movement in the numbers. And so we're at 416.71, 416.72, 73, 74. But that is not only the movement of this, because you can see if I'll just stand still here, and you'll see this thing move. See it moving? Now the vehicle is much worse than that. The vehicle will be moving all over the damn place. So it is way worse than that. But what I wanted to show you was that at this plot, I come over to the map here, and I actually have it drawing out a circle at that range. And you can see that line crosses exactly where we parked that vehicle. So I don't necessarily, just looking at this map, I don't know where the signal's coming from on this circle as of yet, because I haven't calculated it yet. That's my next step, is to calculate the actual direction. But I have a circle that prints and shows exactly where that vehicle's parked. You can see it's right on that corner, right on that little nook. right there. I can zoom out, I can zoom in, it'll tell me exactly where that vehicle is every single time. If I can change frequencies. So I'll go to 150. These numbers shouldn't change at all, because the tower's in the same place. It's just on top of each other. Yeah. See, it shows it's a huge antenna now, but it's still the same distance. You still got it crossing the. You still see it's crossing there. And if I change the other towers, you'll be able to see them too. But unfortunately, this map doesn't draw the buildings on, because this building is like here. So it's kind of hard to see when the circle gets small, and it's actually on the island with no reference points. Like if I zoom in here to where this building is, you can see there's no reference points at all in this building. This building's like right here, kind of. But if I lock onto a tower, so let me lock onto a tower, like say 25. Actually, you know what? Let's go 50, because that's all I got to do is get rid of the 1. So I'll lock on the tower 50, and you can see we are dead center. Well, our tower is dead center. Our tower is dead center, and 50 is on this circle right here, which is in this building. So it's one of those guys, but it's on that circle. And you can see as we switch towers, it's kind of hard to see, but watch that circle. Actually, you know what? I'm just going to set it to scan, and I can show you. Scan from 0 to 150. So it'll run through the scan, and every time it hits one, you'll see it change here. So there's that one. Oh, it's on the big one now. If I zoomed out, you could see it. But okay, there's that one. There's that one. 1, 2, 3. That's the third. There's the fourth tower, and then we go big guy. So it's plotting out. It's plotting out as it hits the signal, as it hits the frequency signal. It plots it out, puts it on the map, and you can see it there. Now, like I said, my next thing is to calculate direction, so I can actually have a line come off of that and show where they intersect, and that'll be the exact location. I could then just put a dot on the map, but you know, I kind of like the idea of having the circle with a line, so you can see where they intersect on the map, instead of, you know, just having a dot appear. It's a lot harder to picture a dot, and the dot doesn't show you where you are, whereas this shows you where you are because you're at the center of that circle. So you can actually get a relative view of how far away that target actually is. And while it will detect the range, will detect out to, or I should say the direction. The direction, it will be calculable out to 20 kilometers. 20 kilometers. However, the distance, the range, unfortunately, will only be calculable out to a distance of 4,000. So 4 kilometers. So at 4 kilometers, I can see how far they are. At 20 kilometers, I can see what direction they are. So I think that's pretty useful. I think that's pretty useful, especially at a base installation. So if you have, I don't know if AI put out radio signals or not. I don't know if the enemy AI use radio signals. But this could easily be translated to radar detection as well. It can be translated to antenna detection, laser detection. You know, any of those can be run off the same system with a little tiny bit of tweaking here and there. Because all you're really doing is getting the direction, the distance, and then calculating it out. And that seems to be a fairly involved process, if I must say so. But it works. It works. Definitely doesn't work the same as real life, because real life is a little easier, I think, to triangulate. This not so much. But here you can see my LUA script. It takes a lot of input. So, for example, the highest frequency and lowest frequency from the keyboard, and then floors those. It gets rid of the decimal places because I don't want decimals. So if somebody puts in, you know, like 25.32417, whatever, it just 25. It doesn't care. It doesn't care about the decimal places. It gets rid of them. And then here's the tower inputs from the north, west, east, and south. Down here, I have the GPS X and Y. I have the power source level, so that's the battery level, because I use that in my calculations. Even though I'm assuming that they have full battery power, I'm not going to assume I have full battery power, because that will make my calculation more accurate if I take into account my battery strength. So if I'm assuming they're at full power, but I'm only at 90%, if I calculate in that I'm only at 90%, even if I'm assuming they're full power, that's still more accurate than saying I'm at full power and they're at full power when one of us is known not to be. So I still take my battery into account, even though I don't know what their battery is and I have to assume that their battery is at full. So this is the secondary signal. So this is our large antenna, not the huge antenna. This is a large antenna on the north side. And then I have the map zoom, because I have to pass that on to my second display. So I pull all those numbers in, and then I run my LUA script. So this LUA script here is for doing all the processing, plus outputting the raw data to the screen. This LUA script here is for taking what it needs from this script, drawing the map, and then outputting that to the second screen. So that's all this script does. This script is just for outputting the map. This script here is where the magic happens, and it's a big script. So here you can see all my variables. There's a lot of them. There's a lot of them. I have my GPS coordinates, my minimum, maximum frequencies, my current frequency, my signal from each antenna, north, west, east, and south, my check signal from my check tower, the distance that's calculated from north, west, east, and south, the target antenna, that's the calculation that I do later to figure out what antenna I have, and then I also have a text variable so I can output it to the screen, whether they're using a large antenna, small antenna, whatever. That's just for doing the text. Target X and Y, which I will eventually calculate. I don't have that calculated yet, but I do have the variables in here. Target distance, target bearing, that's another one I need to calculate. So target X, target Y, and target bearing I don't have calculated yet. I haven't done the calculation work for that yet. Then I have the antenna range. This is my antenna range. So if I change my antennas, if I decide to just go with all large antennas for space saving, or I don't know why I would do that, but if I decided to change my antennas, I can edit the number right here, and I don't have to edit it everywhere in the code. The zoom, of course, for the map, battery, charge level, a counter, a north-south calculation, and an east-west calculation, which I'm gonna use these I'll use these to come up with the bearing. I'll use my difference between north and south, and my difference from east and west to get my bearing calculation. But anyway, I haven't done that yet. Coming down here, so first thing I do is I created a couple of functions just in case I needed to round off some numbers. So this one rounds to 2 decimal places, this one rounds to 5 decimal places. Mostly those are for display purposes because I don't want to round off my calculation numbers because that makes them less accurate. But when I display it to screen, I don't want to display 30 decimal places. So that's why I have some rounding happening here. It's actually not really rounding. I call it rounding, but it's actually just cutting off the extra decimal places. Here I have this is the start of the on tick loop. So everything in Lua is done off of tick. So I don't obviously want to run my program every tick because that is insanely fast processing and I don't need to do that. It also bogs things down. So I have it run a count every tick, but I only have it process the code every 5 ticks. So on the 5th tick, we we input our frequency from our north antenna. Or I shouldn't say that. We don't do that yet. Sorry. Every time I read this, it screws me up. So when the count hits 5, first thing we do is we check the keyboard, because if the player hasn't entered a maximum frequency, they can leave the minimum frequency at 0. But if they haven't entered a maximum frequency, then we're not going to do anything because they haven't set it up yet. So we're just going to sit here and keep counting, keep looping. But we're not going to actually get into processing any information if the player's not ready. So I check, make sure that we have a frequency in our max frequency slot, and then we start running the program. So now we check the signal from our first tower, our north tower. That's our primary tower, is our north tower. We do everything from our north tower, except double check the other signals. The other signals are backup signals for the north tower. They let us process the information that we get from the north tower. So first thing we get is the north tower, and at the same time we're gonna pull in the minimum frequency that the players set, regardless of whether they set one or not. It'll be 0 or whatever. But once they set the maximum frequency, we're good to go. We can use 0 as the minimum frequency if we want. So we're gonna get the signal. We're going to get the minimum frequency, see if the player's actually set one. If there is a signal detected on the current frequency that we're on, which we start at 0, we start at frequency 0, regardless of what the minimum frequency is. Our first scan starts at 0. So if there's a signal found, then we continue. If there's no signal found, we jump to the next frequency, and I'll show you that later. But basically, we're going to scan through the frequencies until we find a signal. If we got a signal, then we're going to pull in the signal strength from west, east, south, and our check signal. And now we're going to grab our battery signal, or our battery strength. So only when we get a signal on the north tower do we then grab west, east, south, the check signal, as well as the battery. Once we have that information, now we can start calculating stuff. So this calculation right here is our check to find out what antenna the guy's doing. And I appreciate if you're reading along with the notes. I wrote the notes in here just because I intend to put this on the workshop later, so I decided to put in notation. But anyways, this check right here is a calculation to basically determine what kind of antenna the target is using. So we take our 2000 distance, multiply that by our signal, because our tower is 2000. We know our tower is 2000, or 20,000 I should say. We know our tower is 20,000, so we're going to check our signal against that. Then we're going to check our large tower. We know that's 4,000, so we're going to check our large tower against that. Then we're going to subtract 16,000 off of that. Once we subtract those, we're going to subtract 16,000 off of that, because this will come in at a really high number. We'll subtract 16,000 off of that, because that's the remaining. And then we're going to divide by our check signal minus our tower signal. So the difference between our check signal and our huge tower signal right here. So we're going to take this here, which basically brings the number down. Then we're going to divide it by our check signal and our tower signal. Or I should say the sum between our check signal and our tower signal. And that's going to bring it down to approximately the number of the tower. So if it's a huge, it's going to be somewhere around 20,000. If it's a large, it's going to be somewhere around 4,000. It's not going to be exact. It's going to be a range there that we're going to get there. And then here is where I do my calculation to fix that offset. So if it's between 17K and 23K, so 17 is my low end, 23 is my high end. This is the buffer I was talking about. So if it's between 17 and 23, I set it at 20,000, and I label it huge. If it's between 2,000 and 6,000, I set it at 4,000, call it large. If it's between 800 and 1,200, I set it at 1,000 and call it a medium. I need these numbers here to be accurate. I need these to be what they're supposed to be, not what they're calculated at. So the calculation gets me close enough to figure out what the hell antenna they're using and what that number actually should be. So, and then a small antenna, like I said, 50 to 150. The antenna is I set it at 100 because that's what a small antenna is, and then I label it small. Otherwise, if it can't figure out what antenna it's using, target antenna is 0, and I'm gonna have a label for that. I do have a label for that. It's called unknown, but I still have to set a number for that. I have to take this calculation and I have to wipe it out. I can't leave it. I have to get rid of it. So if it doesn't fit any of these, I got to get rid of the calculation and just put 0. Because it's going to end up dividing by 0 up here anyways. If it's got no signal here, if this minus this is 0, and now we're dividing by 0, we got a problem. Because we got multiply by 0, but, so we're going to have 0, 0, minus 16,000. So we're going to have negative 16,000 divided by 0. and I just have to get rid of that calculation. We can't keep that. So if it doesn't fit here, it just resets it back to 0. Says to hell with that, check. We're setting it back to 0. So then what we have is our distance calculation. This is the target antenna plus the antenna range multiplied by our battery, or multiplied by their battery, which we're assuming is full, and then multiplied by our battery, which can be at whatever our battery's at. And then once we have that calculation, we multiply that by 1 minus our signal. So basically we're inverting our signal, because our signal is going to be like 90, or it's going to be like 0.99 something or other, like this close. It's going to be 0.99 something or other anyway. So we're going to get the bottom end of that. We're going to get our 1 minus, the 0.999. So we're actually going to end up with the flip side, which is like 0.11 something, So what this does is it takes the target antenna and the antenna range, multiplies it by 1, multiplies it by our battery, and then multiplies it by the remainder of the signal, or like the bottom end of the signal. So once we have our distance calculated out for each antenna, we need to figure out what the total distance is. So we're going to add those together, north, west, east, and south, divide by 4. That's going to get us an average. And the average is going to be what we consider to be our accurate number, because we are, instead of using the GPS and just saying, okay, we have 1 point here and 1 point here, we are taking 4 distinct different points, and we are calculating a difference and then averaging between those 4 points. So this is far more accurate than that GPS, as far as I'm concerned. Far more accurate. In this game. Now, in real life, GPS is pretty damn accurate. But in the game, using these signals is going to be far more accurate in my mind than going, from GPS to GPS. Specifically, since you aren't going to know what their GPS location is. So this figures out their location, figures out the distance, figures out the range, figures out the direction. Well, it will figure out the direction, but it figures out the distance and the range, all that stuff, without knowing where they are. So we don't have their GPS coordinates to calculate, the information. All we have is an errant radio signal. They hit transmit, we got them. We know exactly where they are. As soon as if they hit transmit and our frequency sweep passes over them, we will know where they are. And it doesn't matter if they're enemy, doesn't matter if they're friend, doesn't matter, doesn't matter. We'll know where they are. So, so that's our calculation there. So last detect, this is for after I do the calculations. I'm gonna X and Y. This will be for that. I just put it in here as a kind of a placeholder, because this is where I'm going to do the calculations to figure out what direction it's in. So, and then we have the last detected frequency, which we want to hold on. We want to be able to output that to a display, because we don't want to lose that. So once we've detected a signal, then we'll log that frequency until we detect our next signal. If we don't detect our next signal, we'll hold on to that indefinitely. So we will always know what our last signal was that was good. Now I could put that in a function probably, and like record up to 10, up to the last 10. I might have to do that for the display purposes later, but for now I'm not doing that. I might have to do that for the display purposes later, but I'm not doing that right now. Anyway, so now we have to add 1 to the frequency so it can go to the next frequency. If the frequency is less than the minimum frequency, we want the frequency to equal the minimum frequency. So like I said, our very first run through, it's going to be at 0, and then it's going to go +1, and then it's going to go, oh shit, we're not, the player wanted us to actually start at 30. So now, after it does that very first scan at 0 and goes to 1, and then it goes, oh shit, we're not where we need to be. So then it'll change it to 30. So this happens very, very, very fast, faster than the player actually will notice. It'll just go 0, then start, and then 30 or 40 or 50 or wherever the player told it to start. And then if the frequency is over the maximum frequency, so say you set a stop at 150, and you are now here at 151, it goes, shit, nope, 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 and it'll restart the circle down back at the minimum frequency again. So I do this at the end. I do this at the end of the process, but if it doesn't run through this process, it still has to do this. So I have it happen on the else as well. So this is if it didn't detect a signal, it still has to go on to the next frequency to check the next frequency. So if it has a signal, it goes through all this and sets the frequency to the next frequency. If it didn't detect a signal, it still has to set the frequency to the next frequency and make sure it stays clamped within the limits of what the player set, minimum, maximum. So that's that section there. And then down here, I have to output some information for the display. Because I didn't realize this, but if you do not, signals don't transfer through each other, which is weird, especially through these LUA scripts. I don't know how it works any other way, but through these LUA scripts, signals don't transfer. So if I don't pull these, and I go to the next script and try to draw some of these that weren't pulled and then sent back out, I won't have access to them. So down here at the bottom of this script, anything that I need for my next LUA script, I need to send from here to that script. So here I reset the count to 0. This, of course, is, when we're on our 5 count. I reset the count to 0. I output I input, I should say. I didn't need my GPS for this calculation for any of this calculation up here, but I do need it for the map. So I bring in my GPS, X and Y, as well as the zoom setting, which the player sets, the map zoom, and then I send them back out right away. Because I don't need them in this script, but I do need them in the next script. So I pull them in, send them out. And then from this script, I also send out the frequency, the target distance, and the target bearing. I don't have the target bearing yet, but it'll just send out a 0 for now. So I have frequency, distance, and bearing that are getting sent out. And then it does the screen draw for the text display screen. So this is the text display screen with the frequency, last X, last Y, signal, and all that stuff that we were looking at just 2 minutes ago on the black screen with the white writing. That's what this is. It just draws the black screen with the white writing. So then I go to my next script right here, which is this is what I was talking about. All these inputs here, if I don't send these inputs through this script, they will not be available in here. So whatever I need in this script here, I have to input here and then send out, or it won't come out. I found that out the hard way. I was like, why will this script not work? Why? And then I finally tried it. I was like, oh, okay, because my GPS coordinates down here, my GPS X and GPS Y, I wasn't sending them through. So when I went to call them here, it didn't know what to do. It didn't have access to them. So I had to actually pull them in here, send them back out, even if I didn't use them in the script. I still had to pull them in and send them back out. So if I look at the script over here, this is the map drawing script. So I have my GPS X, Y, frequency, target distance, target bearing, middle of the screen, mid-screen width and height, distance, and zoom. So on tick, I get the GPS X, GPS Y, zoom, frequency, target distance, and target bearing. Those were all the variables that I sent from the last script. Even if I didn't use them in the last script, I sent them. So then down on here we have screen draw. It gets the width and the height of the screen that it's on, and then it calculates the middle of those. So mid W is, oh, wait a minute. I just noticed an issue here. That hasn't actually had any effect yet, but that's interesting. I didn't declare those variables up here. I declared them right here because I didn't set them up there. Anyway, so we have mid W and mid H. So we basically take the width of display 2 divided by 2, the height of display 2 divided by 2. And then our distance to target is our target distance. So that's the target distance from our calculation. And then we divide that by 1,000. Don't ask me why I divided it by 1,000. I'm pretty sure I just did that to get the number down to... Why did I divide it by 1,000? I don't even know why I divided it by 1,000. Oh, because I had to move the decimal places. I had to bring the decimal places down. That's right. I had to make it a decimal. So if it's out at like 200 meters, I had to bring it down to like 0.2. So it would that way it would plot properly. Yeah. Okay. So then I set my screen color to black and I clear the screen. Then I draw the map with my GPS X, my GPS Y, and my zoom. So that's where the zoom setting comes in. So I draw the map with the zoom setting. And then if the frequency, because remember I'm bringing in the frequency here, so if the frequency is greater than 0, we're going to draw out. Now this frequency, I wrote this wrong because this frequency is actually the signal strength. It's not the frequency. It's not the channel that we're on. It's actually the strength of the signal. So I kind of labeled that a little weird. So if there's a signal, then it'll draw on the map, XY position, map to screen, map X, map Y, zoom, takes all that into account, screen width, screen height, GPS X, GPS Y, it takes all that into account. And then that basically gets me the coordinates I need. So it kind of deciphers the map so I have coordinates. So then I set my screen color, which is basically setting the color of the circle, to 255, which is green, 0, 255, 0, which is green. And I set it at a transparency of 200. So it's not completely solid, but it's solid enough that you're going to see it. You'll still be able to see a little bit of edging between the circle and the background. And then I draw a circle. I draw a circle at XY, which is our location, taking into account the distance, taking into account the zoom and the screen width, and then I draw a circle. So I use the screen's width plus the zoom with the distance that I have calculated up here, and that's how I get my circle. Now to draw the line, it's going to be a little more complicated because I'm going to have to use the bearing calculation to basically draw a line from XY in a specific direction, which is going to be our bearing. And north, of course, straight up is going to have to be 0 because a bearing's taken from straight up. So I think the screen, I think if you're rotating on the screen, you start over here, not up here. So that's going to be, I'm going to have to calculate in that difference or figure that out. But this is basically what I've got so far, and it works. And then I have my output to screen 1, output to screen 2, and I also output my frequency to a number here just in case. Just in case I want to look at it. Plus, this has to go to the antennas. This is what goes to the antennas to tell the antennas what frequency they're set to. So the calculation here actually sets the frequency on the antennas, not the other way around. It's not the antennas aren't telling this what it's checking. This is telling the antennas what to check. So if this says, hey, I'm on frequency 5 now, the antenna's like, okay, let's get to frequency 5. And this is, oh, now we're on 10. Okay, let's get to frequency 10. So that's how it basically tells the antennas what frequency they're supposed to be on, and then produces the scan. It's like I said, I've been at this for hours and hours, but I finally got it working. And that's kind of what I wanted to show off was the fact that I got it working, and all written completely from scratch. Didn't have any assistance other than like I said, the assistance that I had figuring out a couple of bugs on the stopping at the frequency or detecting the frequency, but that wasn't really a huge deal. I forgot to hook up one of my freaking. I had been staring at it all day, and when you're staring at stuff like this all day, it is so hard to see if one is not connected. And I ended up in that situation where I didn't have one connected. And I actually ended up in that situation with this too, because I didn't have my GPS X and Y connected, but you see all the lines that are crossing over them? I didn't even know I didn't have the GPS X and Y connected. So when I was doing the map drawing, it kept defaulting to the starting position or the 0 position of the map, which is not here. The 0 position of the map is actually where's the 0 position of the map? Way over. Where is the 0 position of the map? It is. Oh, we're getting there. It is right somewhere around here. Somewhere real close to here is the 0 position of the map. And I should be able to. This is sandbox. So the 0 position of the map should be somewhere around the starting island. There it is, Coast Guard Outpost Beginner. That's the 0 point of the map right there. So I was seeing this island on my map, and I was like, why does that not look like the right island? Because the actual island I'm on is over here. So I was like, why is that not right? And that was because I wasn't pulling my GPS from the tower down to here. So what it had for coordinates for GPS were 0 and 0. So that's what it was drawing. It was drawing a map at 0 and 0 instead of drawing a map centered on this tower. So small glitch there. Now I wish I could stand here, and I wish I could have this turned on that while I'm standing here, just so you can see the circle expanding. You know what? I might be able to rig something up. You know what? I'm gonna rig throttle. I'm gonna let this thing take off, and I'm gonna rig a throttle to it. So I'll up the throttle, and it'll drive away, and then you'll be able to see the ring expanding as we scan through the frequency. That's backwards. As we scan through the frequencies, you'll be able to see the rings expanding. So I'll take the logic off of these. I'll put that to the motors. Actually, you know what? I should probably put that into the WS. And then put these back out to their right track steering and left track steering. Made that controller too. tank tread controller. So when you go left and right, it puts power to the right side and rotates. Anyway, so I got that hooked up to throttle here. So now I should just be able to send this on its merry way. And we should be able to watch the wheel expand. Alright, spawn this in. Okay, so let's lock in on, let's set our zoom here. We'll lock ourselves onto, let's say 150, because that's going to be the easiest one to type in. So we are locked onto our truck. You can see how small the circle is because we're so close to the truck right now. But we will tell this truck to take a hike. No, we're not, because we forgot to, well, yeah. Levers only work if you put power to them. Good job, Jodian. Stupid. Alright, let's try this again. So we'll lock in our 150. There we go. So you can see, even at this zoom, you can see it's still within range. We can still view it on the thing here. Okay. So I'm gonna hop in it. I'm gonna set the parking brake, crank this up to full throttle, and then I'm gonna release the parking brake and get out. There she goes. Okay, so we will be able to actually watch that get further and further away from our radio tower. And can't see what direction it's headed off. It's headed off in the direction of the docks. So it's kind of headed this way. It'd be nice if we could actually see the arrow, but you can see it's going and going and going. Eventually it's going to run into something and then just the circle's going to go all funky. It's either going to shrink, or it's going to expand, or it's going to stop expanding, or because it's eventually going to run into something and go flying off a cliff or something. So at some point here, I'm expecting this ring to stop expanding. If it doesn't, we're gonna keep on. It's gonna keep going out into the water. Oh shit! Yeah, I think something happened to it now. Yeah, it stopped. So I'm pretty sure something's happened to it. It's either flipped or it's hit the water and spun out and or sunk down and floated somewhere, or God knows, but it's out there. Where is it? Yeah, it's right off the end of the island now. It's right there. So, because it's off the end of the island, and because it's now blocked, I think that has interference. I think underwater is causing interference, and that's why it looks like it's farther away than it actually is. Because it's underwater. The radio signals underwater, as you know, they are not good. So, but it kept track of it right until she went off the edge, and then when she went off the edge, she had an issue. There she is, on her side in the lake. But like I said, because it's radio waves and it's underwater, there's actually more resistance. So that's why it's not detecting the range properly. If it was still out of the water, it would have a proper range. But I did call that. I did say it was going to go funky when it hit the water. I thought it was going to go funky before it hit the water, when it, if it flipped upside down on the hill or something like that. But it actually happened when it went into the water. So there you go. That's it in action. Showed you exactly where it was right until it couldn't show you where it was anymore. So hopefully you enjoyed that demo. So there you go. Now I have to work out the bearing. I have to figure out the calculations for bearing. I think what I'm going to do for that is basically take the difference between the north and south. That'll tell me whether it's north or south, and take the distance between east and west. That'll tell me whether it's east and west. And based on that number, I can tell how far east, or how far north, or how far south, or how far west it actually is. So if it's a very small number, all I'll have to do is calculate it off degrees, because this here, that would be a 1. This would be 1, this would be negative 1, and then this would be negative 1, this would be negative 1 on the south end. Or this would be positive 1 on the south end. So basically set it up like a grid. So I have positive this way, negative this way, negative that way. And then, you know, if it comes in and the signal comes in and say it's, you know, say the difference between these two is positive 1, I know it's going to be a very, very short angle up this way. It's not going to be way out here. Point 1 is going to be like here. And then say it's like on the north end here, it's going to be a much higher number, the difference here. It's going to be much higher. So then I'll know it's going to be off in this direction based on that calculation, because I know it's not going to be out very far here. I know it's going to be further out here. You can use basic trigonometry. So you can use your triangular edges. So you take this distance here, and then you go out by this, whatever this is, whatever this number was. So you go out this far, and then over whatever this is, and then you just draw a line straight from there through there and continue it on forever. Basic trig. So that is, as they say, is that. But you have to be sure to draw your triangle backwards. So you don't draw your triangle using this 90 degree. You draw your triangle using this 90 degree here. A fake 90 degree right here. So this is going to be your first angle, or this is going to be your first length measurement, this is going to be your second length measurement, and then you calculate out the third and what this angle is. Basic trig. So once you have this angle, you have your bearing. If you have this angle, it's the same thing. All you do is you add to it 90 degrees, 90 degrees, 90 degrees, and then whatever this is, and there's your bearing. Pretty straightforward. Or I did that wrong, but anyway, you get the hint. You get the hint. If it starts at 0 here, then you're gonna add 90, you're gonna add 90, you're gonna add 90, you're gonna add 90. Because that's the way it goes. Excuse me. That's the way it goes. So there you go. Hopefully that enlightens a little bit. I hope. If not, I don't know what to tell you. If I confuse the hell out of you, even more better. Anyway, take care, everybody. This is Jodian signing off. I will see you next time. Bye-bye now.